Only one type of burger. For every pallet. Fries are extra. Large in size. We've got the shakes. Going over the brim.
Hey, this is Chris from JCW's. Put a positive, delicious spin on your day at any one of our 5 locations. In Lehigh, American Fork, Provo, South Jordan, or Harriman. JCW's, quality and a lot of it.
Do you love the Tabernacle Choir? This year, the choir's music is everywhere you are. Listen to your favorite choir songs and music and the spoken word anytime you want on Alexa by simply enabling the skill.
Alexa, play music in the spoken word.
Now playing music in the spoken word.
You can also download the Tabernacle Choir app, subscribe to the choir on YouTube, listen on Spotify, and have access to all their wonderful music. Happy listening.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From 2 guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Jake Scott, Ben Anderson, thanks for making us part of your NCAA Tournament Friday. How's it going over there, Ben?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. I heard yesterday went really well. Thanks to David James for doing a dang super day.
I know.
to help me out. What a stud. What a great coworker.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
And then thanks everyone down at Kenny J's. We had a truly wonderful time down there. So
Lloyd told me that it was the listeners showed up in force after the games got started, and so shout out to all the listeners that dropped by.
Well, it's great food, and it's an easy place to get to. Even wherever you are, you can get down there, even if you're in downtown Salt Lake City, in 20 minutes. So,
and it was kind of a wild day yesterday in the basketball world.
Yeah.
We can get into the Jazz game a little bit later, but my 4-year-old was looking pretty good because she had picked Siena.
Okay, she thought she had it there for a minute.
She did. She thought she had it there for a minute, and then the crooked referees realized they had money on the game. And they were like, well, we can't let that happen.
You think that's what it was?
No, I think they have a bozo coach who didn't make a substitution.
Yeah, that was crazy. Went full Rick Majerus. I'm just going to burn these dudes down.
Like, by the end of the game, they were hoisting air balls because they couldn't lift their arms.
They had no energy.
They had nothing. And Boozer was both Boozers were going through them like like a knife through hot butter.
Yeah. It was a good game for Caden Boozer, the younger, if you haven't followed. He's maybe not lived up to expectations at Duke, though Cam has. But their point guard got hurt right before the tournament, and he stepped in and he played very well yesterday.
So, I mean, I've made jokes in the past when talking about BYU, and of course that's the lead. We'll get to the Cougars. But that you don't really need the depth in the NCAA tournament, which is kind of true.
Sure. Everyone plays a shortened roster for the most part.
But Siena played all 5 starters, all 40 minutes.
I've never seen that.
And gassed does not even describe how that team was at the end of the game. They didn't even give themselves a chance.
No.
Hey, how about with a double-digit lead? Why don't you put in some reserves to get your guys a breather? That's the other thing. It's not like the game was neck and neck the whole time.
No, they were up 11, 12 for long stretches.
Yeah. At halftime, I think they were up 12, right?
Yeah.
So that made no sense to me. So I put that squarely on the coach. But BYU did fall to Texas, and we can talk as to why. I do think the coach bears some responsibility in the Cougar loss as well. However, I do think it proved out, Ben, that what we've talked about with the NCAA tournament, particularly with BYU over the years, is absolutely true. If you get a bad matchup in whatever round, it's going to be a long day. And BYU did not have the size to really, they did not have the size to make Texas a good matchup.
Yes.
Kemba Keita is a fun player to watch. He plays big, all this stuff, but he's 6'8", and he's not a big.
He was awful last night. He was just awful. I mean, he was bad all year, and that was kind of the crown jewel of it, unfortunately, because I thought he was one of the more important players on the team, and I just thought he no-showed last night. Now, some of that is because, he's playing against this Vocatitis kid.
He was so overmatched.
Enormous. And played huge, and good for him. That's why that kid is, where he is. You end up at Texas because you're a legit 7-footer who has some game. He can't shoot free throws to save his life, apparently, but he can play. And Cape is not that big. And it was totally outclassed and overmatched, and I didn't think it was particularly good at any point this season, but last night that really, really came to a head. And it cost BYU their season. And that's not just Cape fault, that's everybody's fault. You got to recruit big players. You got to have 7-footers. You can't trust a 6'7" guy to go out there and play against 7-footers. And that's what ended up biting BYU. But it was a theme all season long.
Yes, it was. And the whole get down thing and then fight back, and it just...
All of the things BYU struggled with all year were on full display.
And I think that's part of what you can put on the coach. Those problems were never really solved. I mean, maybe temporarily, but a lot of that stuff was never really solved. You know, the injuries were rough with BYU. There's no doubt about it. But that stuff existed throughout the season.
Mm-hmm.
And signing a center out of the G League wasn't the answer.
No, it was not. And I get that that's how they tried to address it, but he did not come in and make any type of a difference.
No. And let that be a lesson to you that just because they are technically pros does not mean that they're any good.
9 minutes, 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, 2 fouls. Just absolutely getting
emptiness.
a little bit of cardio out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
For 9 minutes.
Emptiness. So, you know, I think it's unfortunate, and I saw on the Snapchat or what is Snap Talk, whatever we're calling it, you know, people saying, this is a failure. I think our guy Kevin Graham had a particularly spicy take. And, yeah, I think if you were to ask everybody down there in that building if it's a disappointment that they were one and done in the NCAA tournament, I bet to a person they would tell you yes. I'm not really prepared to roll out the failure card because life is always a little more nuanced than that. And I think A.J. DeBonce's season was a total success. I think Robert Wright left a little something to be desired. I think we saw kind of more of the downside of him against Texas. Again, I'm not really out to barbecue everybody, but you needed somebody who was going to dig in and play a little defense and not necessarily play hero ball, settle into a bit more of a role. And I don't think it didn't seem to me like that's what he was doing yesterday. But I don't know, I guess different minds can disagree, but I mean, the coach's job, you know, long and short of it is to address all of that.
One of the problems with Texas, and you're exactly right, and I want to get to that. One of the problems with Texas and drawing them is that as a high major with investment in their program, though clearly they're not like an elite team this year, they do have players who are the right size at every position. It really does matter. You know, you go out and you play High Point, who won, or Siena, who you were just talking about. Like, most of those dudes are...
Siena didn't win, but they gave him a
correct.
Run. Yeah.
But most of those dudes are 2 or 3 inches too small and 20 pounds too light. That is not the issue with Texas.
No.
Texas has legit size at every single position, and that does negate some of what BYU does well, and then they were able to exploit where BYU doesn't have elite positional size, and that was both at point guard, where Robert Wright is very small, and with Cape Ikeda. That is one of the issues. Absolutely, yes. And then, the second is just like, I don't think Kevin Young got more out of this team than was expected. I think he did a replacement-level coaching job this year. Excellent recruiting, definitely dealt with some injuries. When they were fully healthy, they played at a very high level this year. I think they lost one game when they kind of had everybody out there. But, you know, the issues of starting slow, the issues of not seeing the ball move. You know, AJ in this game at one point very clearly just decided, I don't trust anyone else on this team. And he's probably right to do it because he tried to take over in the second half and nearly did it and then ran out of gas, and that was an issue he ran into a few times this season as well. But, yeah, I do think this team underachieved. That doesn't mean they're a failure. That doesn't mean they won't benefit long-term off of having A.J. DeBonce as a part of their program. It's probably already served them as going out and getting Bruce Branch III to come in and kind of follow in his footsteps. I think A.J. is going to be the number 1 overall draft pick. I think he did more than enough to prove that he deserves that honor and is going to be a major difference maker in the NBA. But, you know, the iron, you have to strike while the iron is hot when you have, you know, players of A.J.'s caliber, Robert Wright's caliber, and Richie Saunders' caliber. And yes, you lost Richie late in the season, and I just don't think they lived up to that expectation at all.
Yeah, for whatever reason. But I I don't know. I kind of want to get away from you had a great player. Why didn't you do better? The list of great NBA players that didn't do well in the NCAA tournament is a mile long.
It is.
Kevin Durant had all that, the great games in the Big 12 tournament and all this stuff that we talked about when BYU and A.J. DiBonzo was putting up similar numbers. How many games did Kevin Durant play in the NCAA tournament?
Was it one?
He played two.
He won his first game.
He beat New Mexico State
Okay.
in the first round and then upset by USC in round 2. Chris Paul in his senior year or his last year at Wake Forest lost in the first round.
Yep.
I mean, you can go through the list of all these big time players that didn't necessarily do well in the NCAA tournament. So I don't really correlate the two. We also saw a BYU team without A.J. DiBonzo. That was more of Richie Saunders was, an all-conference player, so it's not like, but they were certainly a different style team, and they go to the Sweet 16. I doubt Richie Saunders will be drafted. I know a lot of people are holding out hope for it, but I think his journey to make the NBA is going to be a long one.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We could talk wasted opportunity. Yeah, the potential number 1 pick in the draft and didn't do anything in the NCAA tournament. Yeah, well, lots of other. I mean, do we crap on Wake Forest because Chris Paul underachieved in his last year there? Or do we even care?
DeAndre Ayton didn't win. I think they lost their first game. It just happens. It does happen.
It does.
But look, this does go back to our very first conversation as the college basketball season was starting, because I remember this very distinctly, sitting in this chair and saying, there are a lot of plates spinning right now for Kevin Young. Which one is going to fall? And you can probably have good young players, and you can probably have a team that wins in the tournament. It's hard to do both. And that proved to be true. He has the best young player in college basketball. A.J. DiBonzo is as good, if not better, than Cam Boozer at the college basketball level right now. Can you have that player, show him off the way they did? And I don't even think they built the program necessarily just to highlight his strengths the way, Rutgers did last season with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. But can you have a player lead the league and lead college basketball in scoring, do a little bit of everything, and still win in the tournament? That's really, really difficult to do. And we have always seen that actually in college basketball. It's why I actually think John Calipari has become very underrated as a coach, because everyone says, well, he can't coach, he just recruits. It's like, well, a lot of other teams recruit and can't win with those guys at all. And at least John Calipari usually wins a couple of games in the tournament. And Kevin Young didn't do that this year. Now, he did it last year. So I'm not saying Kevin Young is incapable of doing it. This is early. He's the right guy for the job. I think BYU is lucky to have him. And I think, going forward, he's going to win more. But he's learning how to do this. And trying to build your program around a one-and-done player does not leave you a lot of wiggle room to work on chemistry, to survive injuries, or to, build year after year. You don't have that inherently with a guy who's only going to be at your college for one season. It's hard to do.
Well, who's playing today? Dallin Hall's playing for the University of Virginia today, and he's not their star, but he plays a pretty key role on their team. Maybe they got the balance wrong. The idea is to have a young player with a traditional BYU team that is get old, stay old. Well, they let a lot of pieces from last year's team go.
Yeah.
Now, did they have to do that to have the resources to get the star young player? I don't know, but that's an interesting convo.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much do you carve into, what makes BYU a success, or certainly made them a success last year, do you do to add the headliner young player? Because the idea was always the balance between the two and pulling off what few teams have ever pulled off and kind of going into uncharted waters, which I love the concept.
Absolutely.
And if BYU can pull it off, it's great. But maybe they carved off too much of the get old, stay old to get the young.
Maybe you robbed Peter to pay Paul.
Right. If you had to let Dallin Hall go to UVA because you didn't have the Ched because you got to pay A.J. DiBonzo.
Right.
I'm not saying don't recruit A.J. DiBonzo necessarily, but maybe you've got to rethink that calculation. Because I don't think going with just a one-and-done young player is good. He's a dang All-American.
Yep.
But that's not the formula. The formula, or at least in theory at BYU, was put that All-American with a team that's been playing together and that knows what they're doing and has some scrappiness and going to guard and all these other things. And it didn't turn out to be that way at BYU because of, I don't know, they didn't get the right players. They got players that got injured.
Yeah.
I think that's a conversation to be had. Would BYU have been better with Dallin Hall instead of Rob Wright?
And look,
and honestly, maybe the answer is no.
No, the answer might be no.
I have no idea.
Robert Wright was really good this year. He was not good last night, but he was really good this year.
But is he the type of player that the team needed? You know?
Xavion Stanton, you remember, was another top 50 recruit that went to BYU this year. Probably got a pretty hefty payday, I would imagine, coming out of his Las Vegas high school. I'm pretty sure he got hurt early in the year, but when he did play, he was not a difference maker. Again, it goes back to paying young players. You would pay AJ 1,000 times out of 1,000. But you're right, when you're trying to strike the balance of BYU get old, stay old, mixed with the young superstar, were you able to find that balance? Maybe the idea of being able to do it was more of a myth than we recognized because they don't have endless finances when it comes to building out the roster. Because, yes, you say goodbye to Dallin Hall. You say goodbye to some of these players who did leave for other schools that could have helped you this year.
Because the superpower of BYU should be retaining good traditional BYU players because they have an extra incentive to stay there. That isn't necessarily I'm going to go somewhere for the highest bidder. So I'm assuming, and again, using that word assumption because I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming Dallin Hall went to UVA because they didn't want Dallin Hall anymore.
I think that's a safe assumption, but I do not know.
And I'm sure they wanted Dallin Hall, don't get me wrong, but they were going to use those resources somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's not just a scholarship. It used to be like, oh, we're going to use that scholarship somewhere else.
Right.
It's going to use those resources somewhere else. And so, you know, if you want to chalk the failure up to a lack of depth, I'd listen to it. A lack of bigs, I'd listen to it. But why were those things? I don't think the depth was as harmful as the way the team was built, as the construction. Does that make any sense? Or at least against Texas.
Sure, certainly against Texas.
I think if they have anybody with any sort of size against Texas, I think that is an entirely different game. But you have the center can just rebound his own ball
every time
until he makes it.
Yeah, it was the Houston Rockets offense, which is we just get the most offensive rebounds, and we're going to get a putback at 2 feet away, and that's going to score 70% of the time.
Yeah, he may have to take 4 cracks at it, but he's going to get 4 offensive rebounds, and he is going to score. I mean, it's like playing basketball against Hans Olsen, which I have the pleasure of doing. I mean, Kepaketa could have had a quote-unquote good game, but he's a 6'8" guy trying to compete against how big is that guy from Texas?
7'1"
I'm sorry.
At least.
I struggled.
Vogatitis.
I struggled with his name listening to it on the television.
He had 16 rebounds. 9 of them came on the offensive glass.
He's a monster.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
He's a monster. BYU didn't have any. BYU could have used just a big stiff to stick in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, ironically, so we're talking Dallin Hall, we're talking all these different things, and, you know, the answer that BYU probably needed all along was modest Vogatitis. And this is a kid who was at, where was he, South Florida last year? I'll pull up where he played last season. But, yeah, that's actually the guy they needed. He was at Florida Atlantic last year. Like, that's probably an available dude. He averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds last year. Like, that's a transfer portal guy that Texas obviously went and invested in. Maybe going forward, that's where BYU needs to start looking, which is we have to have the right size at every position to fit next to our superstar young player. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, a superstar player that's transferring in, but having the guy who's the right size at the right spot would have been really meaningful last night.
But I do love it that Kevin's out there with the hot take trying to paint it as a failure. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. They were a top 25 team all year long, and they lost in the first round. Yeah, they were upset. It was a disappointing ending. I don't think anybody would argue with you, but simply blasting away, I think things are a lot more nuanced. And if I'm Kevin Young, who's still a young head coach, I'm learning a bunch of lessons from that, which I'm sure he is.
I also, and we also, don't know, and it's probably case to case, but it may lean one way or the other. I don't actually know how much these one-and-done players care after their season ends because they just go on to the next thing. Like, AJ could be very sad today, and then tomorrow he goes and gets his pre-draft workout crew together and starts working towards his next $10 million contract. You know, like, this stinks. This is hard. I'm sure it's never fun to lose. He's a competitor. I thought he really poured his soul into this team this year, and I was really impressed by that. But he always knew this was going to be a one-and-done thing, and then you just move on to the next thing. So along those lines, it's like, you know, fans might be frustrated by it. Some of the players might be frustrated by it. Richie Saunders' career is over. He's probably frustrated by it. But some of these one-and-done guys might just be ready to move on to the next thing. Like that's also the nature of this business for these players. The college basketball is a hurdle. It's not even a stepping stone. It's not even a springboard. it's something in the way of you getting to your actual goal. And I don't blame young players for feeling that way.
By the way, BYU's former coach might be in some trouble. They're up 10-8 on Santa Clara. I'm not necessarily talking about just this game, but if he doesn't do some damage in the tournament, he might be out. Mm-hmm. He's under a ton of fire.
Very easily, yeah. If you lose this game, I think he does get fired. You lose to an underseed, a lower seed, after having a very disappointing season with a rumored $20 million roster, yeah, he would be in major trouble. He needs to get to the Sweet 16.
10-8. They leave Santa Clara. Yeah, we've got some Utah news coming out. I just saw that Christian saying in our ear in relation to Kyle Whittingham. I haven't read totally through this, but it looks interesting.
Yep.
And we've got reporting on it at KSLSports.com. So make sure and check that out. Again, one game underway. Kentucky leads Santa Clara. The 10:40 game starting today, Ben, is 12-seed Akron and 5-seed Texas Tech. The 11:30 game is 16-seed Long Island taking on 1-seed Arizona. The 11:50 game is 14-seed Wright State and 3-seed, speaking of Dallin Hall, UVA.
Okay.
There you go.
How's Vautech?
Not playing. By the way, you know why I love the tournament? Because it's not on ESPN, and I don't have to look at stupid Seth Greenberg pretending like he knows freaking anything.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of people who look like they knew something, how about Christian wearing glasses today? This dude, freaking dweeb, but he looks smart.
That's what Lloyd said yesterday, too.
Yeah.
He walked in, he said, wow, you look smart.
Well, make you full-time, and all of a sudden you get glasses.
We'll get to the Utes.
Insurance does for you.
Utes news coming up next. Stay tuned. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us? No! Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jacob Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports News. We have, or Sports Zone. We have breaking news that has broken over the past 20 minutes or so. And let's get on the man himself, shall we? He's reports on the Utes for KSL.com. He's doing a great job reporting this story in particular. We're very fortunate to have on the show right now Josh Furlong. What's going on, Josh?
What's going on? It's been a fun morning, hasn't it?
I bet.
Yeah, so the big story here is that we've got new details on Kyle Whittingham's transition away from Utah and to becoming the head coach of Michigan. And basically, the core of the story is that Kyle Whittingham wanted to come back. He wanted basically a $2 and $2.5 or $2.7 million raise. So he intended to be back not just for this season, but next year. And Utah countered. What was the counter from Utah and Mark Harlan, and what was the fallout?
Yeah, so essentially Utah wanted to counter and say his base salary would essentially get up to about $8 million. So about about $1 million less than what he had expected. And it would only be a 1-year term. And as part of that, they were going to really give Morgan Scalley a ton of power, mostly as it relates to the future of the program in terms of recruiting, the decision-making in terms of roster management, staffing. And so even though Kyle would have been head coach under this, amended agreement, it would give Scalley the opportunity to kind of veto anything if Kyle wanted to take the program in a different direction. So it was really just trying to protect their future while still maintaining an opportunity for Kyle, and giving him that option outside of him just living out the life of his contract as it currently states, which would, his retirement contract as part of that, which would allow him $3.45 million each year. So he could either retire or take this 1-year deal that would pay him $8 million, but then it would be pretty much guaranteed that Morgan Scalley would move into the head coaching job.
All right, so I'm curious about this. What are they calling it, Josh? Amendment or whatever that was signed, where Utah is still paying out this money but taking the high road, even though he took another job. Break this down for me.
Yeah, so essentially they had agreed to a $13 million deal that essentially would say, okay, instead of doing the retirement route where you're going to work with the athletic department for 2 years and kind of pay out the rest of your contract at a lower rate, they're just going to basically give a transition bonus to say, hey, we want to move on to Morgan Scalley, and we're going to give you $13 million paid out over the next 3 years. And so as part of that, there's little things that said he had to help the transition of the program, really just kind of not taking the employment out inside the state of Utah. There wasn't anything specified outside of the state of Utah. And so it really was just kind of like, hey, we want to make sure that we're transitioning to Morgan Scalley in a right way. You're not going to prohibit this in any way or cause problems, and we'll pay you X amount of dollars to be able to do it. And, that didn't obviously work out. Kyle Whittingham takes the Michigan head coaching job, and Utah still pays their $8 million out at the beginning of January. But there's a letter sent from Mark Harlan that basically he expresses his disappointment with Kyle and how he operated, taking coaches, taking players, and that kind of stuff, which didn't really lead to the smooth transition. But at the end of the day, at least in this letter, there's probably more documents out there than I wish we could have gotten, but they basically said, we're not going to fight this anymore. We're just going to let it move on, and we'll continue to pay out the deal.
So they're paying him $13 million to coach at Michigan?
Yep, basically. So he gets $8 million. He got $8 million in January, and then the last part of that $13 million will be paid out next year and then in 2028. So kudos to Whittingham for getting $13 million from Utah while still getting paid a hefty salary at Michigan.
All right, Josh, this is less of an objective question, more subjective. How are Utah fans going to view this both for Mark Harlan and for Kyle Whittingham, and including some boosters?
That's a good question, because I think there was a segment of the fan base that definitely wanted to move on to Morgan Scalley. And so it was, Kyle, I think many expected Kyle to move on last year and say, hey, go right out in the sunset. You kind of got the dream that you wanted. Yeah, maybe it wasn't playoffs, whatever. And so there was a lot of people that wanted to move into the Morgan Scalley direction. Well, there were still some donors and still fans that wanted Kyle to stay as long as he wanted. You don't push out a Hall of Fame coach, especially after having an 11-2 season. So on one hand, you're going to have some people that think that Mark Harlan didn't do the right thing in paying a Hall of Fame coach and kind of pushing that along, whereas others kind of wanted to rip off the Band-Aid and say, hey, let's go to Morgan Scalley. So, I don't know that there's like a right answer here. I mean, I know obviously there's frustrations in the way that Kyle Whittingham handled it and taking the coaching staff and obviously not helping in the smooth transition. But at the end of the day, Utah has to kind of look at its future, right? Like, we talk about this as a business, and you kind of have to figure out where your path is. And Utah identified Morgan as that path forward. Whether right or wrong, remains up to interpretation. But I think that's how they view that. Now, look, I mean, obviously this feels like a tough situation for Mark Harlan. And, if it backfires, let's say Morgan doesn't live up to the expectations, this looks even worse on him. So, it's a tough situation. I don't know that there's an easy answer here, but I think, depending on whichever angle you're looking at it from, you can kind of find your own fodder to kind of make this a situation that is frustrating for you, if that makes sense.
I'm curious for your opinion on something with this, Josh, because I do have some sympathy for Mark Harlan in this way. And you've seen The Godfather 2, right? You've seen that movie?
It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Hyman Roth, one of the bigwigs, is retiring, and he's handing out all his interests to all these gangsters, right, including Michael Corleone. And when they discover that he's basically betraying them, Michael says the old man thinks he's going to live forever. Right, it's kind of a line. All these geezer coaches think they're going to live forever, and they set these marks like, oh, I'm going to retire here, and then they never do. Bobby Bowden was 105 before he stepped down at Florida State, but Kyle Whittingham made a comment like, oh, never mention your retirement, or I'll never make that mistake again. He did more than that. He put it into his contract. He had provisions in his contract about retirement. And you act like a coach in waiting thing is all, well, Utah just named that. Kyle Whittingham was all on board, including letting Morgan pick the offensive coordinator last year. All this stuff. It's not like he was, in my opinion, an innocent caught off guard, like what? I mean, he was an active participant in that. And then I understand him kind of going back and saying, oh, wait, I'm not done. And in fact, I want some big dough. I understand that. But can you really be bitter when the the university was planning on turning the page. Does that make any sense? I'm curious to your opinion on like that overall, because I do feel a little bit for Mark Harlan, who would appear made plans on what to do with his football program, and then it got off the rails.
No, I think you're completely you're right, exactly on the right path, right? Like I think Kyle Whittingham did himself more dirty than anybody else, right? In the sense that he set this up, right? And I think he truly believed that he was going to retire in a few years, and he wanted to be able to, make that path forward when he set up this Morgan Scalley coach in waiting option. And so, he created this opportunity because he wanted Morgan to be able to stay invested. He wanted him to stay. Morgan was getting interest from USC. He was getting interested in, from other programs around the country. And so I think this was a nice incentive to say, hey, my time as a head coach is obviously going to come and go. We want to keep you going with this. You're obviously a Utah man, that kind of stuff. Now, like you said, as part of that, he wrote it into his contract. He talked Morgan Scalley up. He involved him in all of the decision making. Like, what else are you expected as a university to expect if, you're doing all this, you're saying all this, even going into the last 2 years, everybody's expecting Kyle Whittingham to retire. There's nothing about the way that Kyle operated that didn't lend itself to him going into that retirement route. Now, sure, he has the opportunity to say what he wants. He still had 2 years left on his contract, but every indication was that he was pushing in that direction where he was going to retire until that last week where he decides to say, hey, actually, I have no intentions to retire. So it's tough. I understand the university and the problems that they have, but it's tough, too, from that same look of saying, we've got to move on. We've got to kind of move on to the new era. You're seeing college football, especially, is transitioning to a lot of these younger guys, getting in some new fresh blood. You kind of get stagnant a little bit with 20 years of the same guy. You kind of have to advance. And if you hold on too long, does that do more damage to the program? Does that do more damage to the donors? And I think that's ultimately where Mark Harlan wanted to go. And that's why he's not willing to go up to $9 million. Whether it's, 8 or 9 million, I don't think that's a huge difference when it comes to coaching salaries. I mean, let's be honest, to us, it's probably a huge difference, but whether it's 8 or 9 is not a big difference. And if Mark really wanted to get there, he could get to 9 million. It's just, I think they felt like Morgan was the future, and that's the direction that they wanted to go.
Sounds to me like they were trying to thread the needle, which I can't blame them. Do right by their legend, but at the same time move on. That strikes me about what the counter offer was all about. I just don't know if that's possible when dealing with coaches. And again, they're going to live forever.
Yeah, and I mean, this is tough too because we don't, as part of these documents, we don't actually get Utah's full side of this. We get Kyle's agent and what they're requesting, and it just says, hey, as we've discussed, but we don't actually get Utah's side of this. So there may be more things here where maybe Utah was playing more hardball than was reported, right? And that's the frustrating thing to me is I want the full documentation, and we don't have all that. And so there's aspects of this that's still kind of unknown, and Utah's obviously giving us some documents that help, but we're not fully there yet. And I don't know that it's fully going to matter. At the end of the day, these two parties broke down. Kyle decided to step away. But I think, we're getting kind of a one-sided look of this and not getting to see Utah. Were they playing difficult? Was this something that could have been worked out? And instead, more, Kyle's trying to, I don't want to say stick it to him, but say, hey, look, if you're not going to play nice with us, this is what I'm going to ask, and, try to make things more difficult. So it's tough. We don't have the full side of Utah's perspective in these documents, but at the same time, I don't know that much is going to change because Kyle kind of made his own bed. And at the same time, Utah, no matter what, was looking like they wanted to go in the direction of Morgan Scalley.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, great work. Keep it up, man. Thanks for jumping on with us. We really appreciate all the info, and we'll chase everybody over to KSL.com for more. Thanks,
Josh.
That sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right, there you go, Josh Furlong, and does have a really good write-up. I've got it right in front of me at KSL.com for more info on this. This is, it's kind of funny about this is that we know about it, that they're putting it out there. Utah's fighting back in a way. I don't know if that's the smart move, but they are
hitting themselves in the face with a pie and then saying, "And we're fighting back." What?
I don't think this is them hitting themselves. How is it hitting themselves in the face with?
They're paying Kyle Whittingham $13 million to coach in Michigan. End of story. And that's his right. That's in his contract. And look, I get that Witt put them in a difficult spot by coming back and saying, I want $4 million more over the next 2 years, and I want a bigger investment in my NIL, and you've got to give that to me. And they basically countered by saying no. They said, we'll let you coach for one more year, but you're going to be neutered because we're going to give Morgan Scalley all the power. And Witt said, nope, I'm not interested in that. And so they had to part ways, and maybe Witt wasn't going to put them in a spot where he was going to be able to be retained. But regardless, at the end of the day, they are cutting Kyle Whittingham checks to go coach at Michigan.
I think, while that's 100% true, I'm not disagreeing with that necessarily. I think they made that agreement in order to do right by their legend coach. They didn't want Kyle Whittingham as their coach anymore. They didn't.
Why?
I mean, that's what Furlong was talking about. Why? I'm not making the decision.
That's the question, though. That's how are they hitting themselves in the face with the pie? They told their Hall of Fame coach to hit the road so they could get the next guy, which is fine. But A, Morgan Scalley better be absolutely dynamite now. And B, it's probably going to cost you more money to pay Witt to go away than it would have been to retain him.
I don't think this is about the money. I don't think it.
Utah just sold its soul to an investment company to come in and own all of its rights going forward.
I don't think
for a cut of this check because apparently they needed the money.
I don't think they wanted to just can their legendary coach, but I don't think they wanted him to be the long-term coach of the football team, or at very least, I think they wanted to know how long-term that was actually going to be.
Why would you? He'd only won 10 games the previous season.
It's not my decision, but that's what you can read into this. That's what Josh just said.
And I think it's
moronic.
There's
a segment of Utah, their athletic department, their boosters or whatever, who wanted to move on from that coach. It would not be the first time. And in fact, I brought up Bobby Bowden. Florida State should have fired Bobby Bowden 5 years before he retired. Mm-hmm. He went from a powerhouse program to an also-ran in the ACC because they let him hold on for so long. That was the same thing at Virginia Tech. Now, what do you do after that legend? Now, that's a different story, and that pressure is on Morgan Scalley. But it's not like letting Frank Beamer hang on for 5 years too long did him any favors. So, I don't know. Chasing off a guy who won 10 games or whatever, I think it's more complicated than that. Nor do I think Kyle Whittingham was untouchable.
In what way?
I don't think he can just write his own check and decide how long he's going to stay.
Yeah, maybe no coach can.
And plus, they didn't fire him after a 4-win season, which they absolutely could have done.
Uh-huh.
But they did right by him by saying, we don't want you to go out like that. And like that. And they delivered on it. And then I think all these things that we're finding out today is Utah screaming that we tried to do right by this guy, and he's the one who left. And they're paying him all this money because he found the loophole or whatever and took another job. But they're going to take the high road. I find Mark Harlan's statement really fascinating, if not a bit unnecessary.
But pathetic. Yeah.
I think
completely pathetic.
Yeah, unnecessary is the word I'm going to go with. But he wants to point out to everybody that's going to listen that they are taking the high road. That they are the victim. They are going to pay out this money even though they were not treated correctly. I think that'll work. I think that's what these.
That's a good angle for Mark Harlan to take. Yeah, I'm the victim in this situation. It's not going to work for him.
Well,
nobody likes him already.
He certainly doesn't like being portrayed as the perpetrator. So I think he's trying to fix the narrative a little bit, which is probably impossible. But like I said, I do have some sympathy for him in this situation. How are you supposed to plan and figure out what you're going to do with your football program if it's just kicking the can down the road over and over again?
It's the total lack of understanding of what he's doing. And it's crazy to me that the most creative thing Utah felt like they could do is keep Morgan Scalley around. Like, why? Why are you so married to Morgan Scalley? And look, maybe Morgan goes and kills it. I hope he does. Good programs in our state are good for us. So I hope Morgan does absolutely kill it at Utah. But how uncreative is it to say our only option is the defensive coordinator that's been here? That's it. You were married to that decision, and it put you in this spot right here where when Witt said, oh, I actually want to stick around for 2 more years, and I'm happy to be here, and he has the contractual right to do that, he informed Utah by the standards of his own contract that was his plan, and they said, no, we want to give you $13 million to leave. What? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, no, they wanted to give him $8 million to stay, but only for a guaranteed year, and then he was out. Like that, it's in the language that he would have to be like gone, like office cleaned out by February 1st. So it wasn't they wanted to give him 13.5 to leave. They wanted to give him 8 to stay plus the 3.5 retirement thing that he had worked out. That's what they wanted. He said no. They renegotiated. Okay, fine. Here's a bonus, and they called it something else, not a salary. Here is a bonus to go away, but go away nice. And he said, okay, signed it. Said, I'll go away nice. I'll help with the smoothing. That's what Harlan is complaining about. And then you heard Josh mention the loophole that it was in the language that he could not coach in Utah. So he went outside of Utah. So now instead of Utah fighting it, which they probably could under grounds, and this is what Harlan says, under grounds of he's not helping smooth anything with Utah, quite the contrary. So he could go to court and say, we're not going to pay you any of this because you're not living up to your end. But they're not. They're just going to say it's better for all of us if we all just move on. Please move on. And by the way, Kyle Whittingham is talking about Utah like every dang day. He crapped on Utah 2 days ago, saying, it's nice to have these stud running backs because, man, you should have seen the clowns I was coaching at Utah. Oh, it's a luxury to actually have people who know how to play football. I'm sure that irritated Utah. So I think he's telling everybody to move on.
I think people are going to be telling him to move on soon.
Maybe. Well, it certainly, where I'll agree with you, is it's now directly correlated with the success on the football field of Morgan Scalley. I mean, they are now linked hand in hand.
It's just another debacle.
Stay tuned. We'll have more coming up next. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We had some breaking news get in the way of top 3 stories today, but we still want to mention our friends at J. Brooks Jewelers. Cherish your love with J. Brooks Jewelers. Explore their expertly crafted engagement rings made from the finest materials. By the way, I did want to clarify where all this info is coming from. It's all, we're talking about Utah, a bunch of documents released. This is all, what do we call it here, Ben? It's GRAMA here, right? Not
Freedom
FOIA?
of information, yeah.
Well, it depends on the state.
Yeah, same thing.
So here I think it's GRAMA.
DUI, DWI.
Yeah, I know, but, I'm going for accuracy here. But freedom of information stuff.
On our show?
So that is why all these documents are coming to light now. Although, obviously, Mark Harlan's statement is in addition to that.
This feels like a Friday news dump during the NCAA tournament to me.
Yeah, there could be something to that.
It's definitely that.
Well,
this is a horrible look for Utah, regardless of whether or not Kevin Harlan's hands were tied.
Kevin Harlan?
Mark Harlan. Shout out Kevin Harlan. Mark Harlan's hands were tied. This is just a terrible look.
I would believe that Utah would like to move on. Yes, I would believe that. So if they're going to throw it out on a Friday during the NCAA tournament, that's probably because they are eager to move on from this whole thing. But I do think that that's where this all started, is I think they were somewhat eager to move on from Kyle Whittingham.
And then the question has to be, why?
He's not the perfect coach. He is not Frank Beamer. Correct. Maybe they thought Morgan Scalley could do a better job.
I hate 10-win teams as much as the next guy. Do not get me wrong. But I kind of thought Whit seemed to have a knack for this whole thing.
But that was the idea, was he was going to come back and have a good season and then go out on a positive note. That's why they brought him back in the first place.
Well, it sounds like it was up to Whit. It's in his contract that it's up to Whit, and a contract they agreed to. So why'd you agree to that contract? Why'd you give him that deal that it was up to Kyle Whittingham? Why give him the coaching option?
But he wanted more.
Great. That was what you agreed to.
I don't know. Whit was great at Utah. I don't think he was the perfect coach.
Of course not. Nobody's a perfect coach. You're now making Morgan have to be more perfect than he would have been otherwise.
Yeah, well, that is certainly true. But I think they were trying to do right by Whit in a difficult situation. I do think there is some of that there. I'm not defending Utah, saying that they've behaved perfectly through all of this. This is ugly. I just saw Stuart Mandel tweet out, hey, we knew it was ugly, the divorce between Utah and Whit. Now it's being confirmed. That's nobody's ideal.
Correct.
But I don't think that Kyle Whittingham was somehow untouchable where he could just write his own ticket.
Nor has he handled this perfectly.
Yeah, that's
Clearly.
No,
absolutely he hasn't done this perfectly, and Utah hasn't handled it perfectly, and the person who got the worst end of it is clearly Utah. Whit got $13 million from that program, $30 million or whatever it is from Michigan, more than that, all the NIL money he could want, and he's still coaching. And Utah's left holding the check with out the Hall of Famer.
Well, he damaged the storybook at Utah, if he valued that, which obviously he didn't. But he absolutely damaged his legacy at Utah. And kind of continues to do so.
And Utah's reputation is really damaged.
So
this is bad for Utah.
I don't think it's like he's coming out of this thing smelling like roses. But if you look at his bank account, sure, yeah, he's the winner.
And if he wins at Michigan, then
what
nobody
if he
will care.
loses at Michigan?
Yeah, it's very possible.
Rich Rod went from the world's hottest coach to an absolute bozo because he didn't win at Michigan.
But also what he did at West Virginia doesn't make sense at Michigan. What Witt does at Utah makes total sense at Michigan.
Does it? Because it seems to me that they don't throw the ball under Kyle Whittingham. And I don't know how that's going to go over at Michigan.
Well, they've got a dual threat quarterback right now who's going to be happy to run the ball. So,
well, we'll see. I don't think it's a guarantee that he has success at Michigan by any means.
And I don't think he's going to win a championship.
Dude, they've got a 5-star freshman running back. They're winning the Natty.
Yeah, I mean, the clowns like Zach Moss that he had at Utah were, I mean, obviously insufficient. And by the way, you know what particularly bugged me about that? And I know that we have Nick Olczyk coming up next. The talented freshmen that he did have in his roster, he absolutely ignored until he had to play them, and then they turned out to be good. Zach Moss didn't play for like the first 5-6 games of his Utah career, and everybody's like, where's this dude?
They did not diagnose a lot of things well during
absolutely
Witt's era.
At that position in particular.
But quarterback, it was an issue. Wide receiver, it was an issue. Yeah, they made those mistakes pretty often.
All right. Nick Olczyk's going to join us next. We'll talk some Mammoth hockey. Stay tuned. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Listen, we're teaming up with Beehive Meals, honoring people that impact youth sports volunteers in our community. Nominate the youth sports volunteer you know for the Beehive Meals Hero of the Week at KSLSports.com/contest. Listen every Thursday to JJ and Alex for the winner. It's the Beehive Meals Hero of the Week. Joining us now, of course, he's part of the Mammoth broadcast, and he's nice enough to jump on with us every single week, and he's actually nice enough to be flexible and move it to Friday this week. We greatly appreciate it. He's our buddy Nick Olczyk. What's going on, Nick?
Jake and Ben, what's going on, boys? Nice to be back in Salt Lake City. Huge win last night, and really nice to wake up to some great news today with the 2-year contract extension of Michael Carcone. So it's a good day in Mammoth Land, and hopefully you guys are doing well as well.
Nick, this is Ben talking. Following up on our conversation from last week. 4-0. I mean, that was they got some help from the plumbing last night that certainly kept the Golden Knights out of the goal, but they were terrific last night. They got out to the hot start and then really controlled the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think that's look. Sometimes you need the bounces, and the posts were the crossbar. They were all working overtime last night in Vegas, and sometimes you get the bounces, and sometimes it goes off the post and into the back of the net. But I think if I were to pick one of the numerous amount of I thought really great parts of Utah's game last night. I thought that the forwards did just an incredible job of back checking and back pressuring, and I mean that's one of the more difficult parts as a forward to do, right? Because you're counted on to score, but in the same vein, when you're going up against great teams that have superstar players like Mark Stone and Mitch Marner and Jack Eichel, like the Vegas Golden Knights do, when those teams are bound to force turnovers, which is inevitable. They can usually catch you in transition and catch the forwards caught up the ice. But whether it was the first line or Utah's fourth line, everybody was coming back. And, from the perspective of a puck carrier, when you're going at a defenseman, it's tough enough to worry about getting around the guy in front of you. But if you also got to look in your rearview mirror and see that there's a car tailing you, now all of a sudden you got something to think about in front of you and behind you, and it really usually makes you make a decision before you want. So I just think Hockey 101, getting a little bit inside the game there, I think that was something that really did not allow Vegas to get as many more looks as they would have wanted, especially in the transition game.
They could get Vegas in the first round, right? What do you think about that potential matchup?
It's a possibility, and honestly, I don't think there's a team that should scare the Utah Mammoths, and I think it's because of how well this team skates, the pace at which they play, the depth on the blue line, and that if your top D pair happens to not be out there against the other team's best in terms of maybe a matchup you're looking for, I don't think you're clenching because maybe your second or your third D pair is out there. Because last time I checked, the pairing of Nate Schmidt and John Marino has the best 5-on-5 plus minus, meaning that they're on the ice for more goals than they are for than they are against at 5-on-5 than any other D pair in the league. So really, matchup-wise, I'm not scared of Vegas at all. Not scared of Colorado, and yes, I know they're running away, or at least they were there for a while with the Western Conference in terms of all the wins and points they were racking up. But the Mammoth have played them extremely well, even last year and into this season too. So no matter what the matchup is going to be, boys, I like this team's chance, and they put themselves in one hell of a spot to just get in. Considering they're 7 points for being out of a spot right now.
Nick, you touched on the extension for Michael Carcone, 2 years, over $1 million annual average.
Yeah.
You know, he was gone last year. I mean, kind of the idea in his locker room cleanout was that he was not coming back. And not only have they rebuilt that relationship, it seems to be thriving. He's playing really good hockey.
Yeah, he's a guy that is so impactful each and every game. Like every single game, there's something that Michael Carcone is doing that makes you kind of sit on the edge of your seat, because there's maybe one guy that can keep up with him in terms of straight ahead speed, and that's Logan Cooley. Whether it is a great back check, whether it is a heck of a rush where he's able to go coast to coast and beat some people wide, or you just watch him when he's controlling the puck behind the opposition's net. I mean, the amount of cutbacks and wrap the puck around the net to try to beat the goalie to the far post. Like there's always something that he does, and he's really become a fixture on that second power play unit. Not just because he can score, but because he is a puck hound. He is more than willing to get dirty, to get grimy, and to go and dig pucks out, even though he may not be one of the bigger guys on the ice, and very much so, for those that don't know, a beloved member of the team, and a guy that everybody else very much loves. And so him being around the next 2 years for about $1 3/4 million each for his terms of his average annual value for the next 2 seasons, I think that's a great deal for him. It's a great deal for the team. Because every game, guys, there is something that he does that makes you go, wow, those are the types of players and people you want in the organization.
You mentioned Carcone's speed, and we've heard you talk a lot about speed, having you on the show and how fast this team is. We've heard the Bear talk about it. Put it into perspective for us. How fast is this team in comparison to the rest of the league? How many teams are as fast or faster?
Yeah, well, I think when you look at the speed bursts, that's kind of one of the more most commonly tracked, I would say, measurements. And anybody, actually, you guys can go online, just type in NHL Edge on Google, and that is one of the National Hockey League's public proprietary, I guess, measuring softwares that tracks player skating speed. There's the speed bursts between 18 and 20 miles an hour, over 20 miles an hour, or over 22 miles an hour. You can kind of see where players rank, top 10 in the league, different players. They also track shot speed. They track a skating distance in terms of how many miles players skate per game, and so many other of the advanced stats from the player and puck tracking, which they've got a little chip in the puck. They've also got chips in the players' jerseys that tracks all of these different numbers. And Utah is a top 5 fastest team in the league. They really are, and it's both their skating speed in terms of maximum speed, but also the bursts that they have. When you think about some of the elite skaters that this team has, like Carcone, as we've mentioned, like a Logan Cooley, also Dylan Gunther. I mean, when you think Dylan Gunther, you may, of course, we all think for the great shot, but you may not think a guy that can really get up and go. Well, he is one of the quicker players on this roster too, and so, boys, like, you could have all the foot speed in the world, but if you don't move the puck quickly, and you're not all playing a connected brand of hockey of being able to predict where your teammate's going to go, foot speed means absolutely nothing. So this team has guys that can beat players wide. They can can make other defenders look very, very silly considering the nitrous type of speed that they do have. But it's also the puck movement as well as what's going up in the brain of kind of being one step ahead of the opposition, because I know what my teammate is going to do, maybe even sometimes before he does it. So I'm going to chip a puck to an area where he's going to go to and he's already on his way to, which he doesn't have to slow up. Or I'm going to hit my teammate perfectly in stride with a perfect outlet pass like Mackenzie Weegar does so well, and he's able to hit Carcone or Cooley or whoever in stride, and they don't have to slow down at all. So it's far beyond just the foot speed. I think it's how this team plays and how quickly they're able to turn their defensive side of the game into some offense.
Nick, we know you're a hockey guy, but you're still an American. Do you watch the NCAA tournament at all?
I'm not a huge college basketball guy. I'm not going to pretend like I am for a month. I will support my friends and root for the schools that they like, boys. But I'm not gonna. I've just never been a big bracket guy and whatnot. But I bleed red, white, and blue all the way through, though.
The sad part is, Ben, if he were a bracket guy, he'd probably win just because he doesn't pay all that close of attention. Right. Nick, we love you. We appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Nick.
Were you going to ask for my pick or what? Is that what we were going with?
You just told us you're not a bracket guy. I just was curious. I don't know. Maybe you get into it a little college. A lot of people who are casual college basketball fans are all into it today, you know?
Yeah. Well, best of luck. Who are you guys picking? Who are your picks to win it all?
Arizona.
I picked the Cougars.
Of?
Houston.
Okay.
Of Houston.
Of Houston, okay.
Yes.
Not BYU.
Not BYU.
Okay.
The Houston Cougars. So.
Okay, all right. So go Cougs and
go Wildcats.
And go Wildcats. Yeah. All right. I root for my friends. So good luck to you guys.
That's my guy right there. Thanks, Nick. You're the best.
All right, boys. Enjoy the weather. Go get a nice tan today. How about this weather?
Oh, I could do a little sunbathing. Yeah. That doesn't sound terrible. See you, Nick. Thank you. I could see Ben in his front yard.
I got my backyard. I worked on it all year last year.
Yeah, but when you bust out the Speedos, you like to be in the front yard.
Right there, right on the main road.
You like to put on a show for not only your neighbors, but everybody driving by.
Nice win last night for the Mammoth. Probably would have talked about it in the top three stories. But, very big one needed, and they got some help around the league as well. Basically, every other team that they're in competition with lost. The Kings did pick up a point. They sent a game to overtime and lost in a shootout, but they extended their advantage.
Our dude Cole Bagley loves the Golden Knights as a possible matchup for the Mammoth in the first round.
You know, be careful what you wish for. They have a lot of talent. You saw it last night. Even though the Mammoth seemingly won that game in dominant fashion, it felt like they were on their heels the entire game.
They just ragdolled them, Ben. Ford Love, dude.
Kind of.
Smoked them. What are you talking about?
I have not seen less puck luck for a team than what Vegas experienced last night. Every shot seemed like it went off the pipe. You just heard it over and over and over. In fact, they made a big deal of it on the broadcast of just how often they were an inch away from getting their first goal or breaking through. They just couldn't quite do it. It's a lot of talent on that team. Hey, can I give you a quick update on a different story? There's so many stories today going on. A federal judge in California has dismissed former Stanford head coach Troy Taylor's lawsuit against the school. The judge found that Coach Taylor did engage in bullying and belittling behavior toward female staffers. So we've probably seen the last of
old Troy?
Of Troy Taylor. Not a great day for former Utah coaches. Again, to your point of Witt not being untouchable, Troy Taylor is as much a face of the failures of Kyle Whittingham as anybody. Troy was a bozo.
Yeah.
Huge bozo.
Hire a high school coach.
Yeah.
Because your brother Fred liked him.
Yeah. That was a horrendous decision. And apparently a bad guy.
Oh, well, and then when he left, got caught under the Twitter mob because we had to say that he was encouraged to leave. And everybody was like, no, he wasn't. He was great.
No.
All right. Well, good on you, Troy.
Juan Lozano on Twitter quote tweets this and says, was his student manager at Cal. One of my least favorite people ever in the game. All-time bad guy. Love this for him. So, didn't have fans that worked with him either.
All-time bad guy?
All-time bad guy.
Oh, who was it? Did you see, who was the former player? God, I shouldn't bring this up without knowing, but I saw it on the Snap Talk yesterday. Did you see, it was a former player, somebody notable that you know, Kendall Gill.
Okay.
Came out and called Bruce Pearl a sleazebag.
Oh, okay.
That guy is I've always thought that guy is a sleazebag. I was dying.
Yeah.
I was like, way to go, Kendall.
Yeah, shout out Kendall.
Yeah, he's kind of proven that he is a sleazebag, honestly. Speaking of college basketball, we're going to talk some Utah State Aggies. We're going to talk to Jeff Neiburg. He covers Villanova for the Philadelphia Inquirer. We'll talk to him about what he thinks about today's matchup with Utah State. Of course, you'll hear that game right here on the KSL Sports Zone. By the way, for those of you wondering, it's at the half, and Mark Pope's down 2, 31-29.
Yep, not a great
Santa
performance
Clara.
so far.
And Texas Tech is up on Akron 37-29 with about 2 minutes to go in the first half.
Great.
And let's see, what time is it? About 10 minutes, Long Island will start against Arizona. All right, stay tuned. We're going to talk Villanova basketball and their game against the Aggies coming up. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jacob Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. The Aggies of Utah State taking on Villanova in the first round of the NCAA Tournament this afternoon, starting at 2:10 our time. You'll be able to hear the game right here on the KSL Sports Zone. Let's get out of the zone phone. Joining us now, he covers Villanova for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He is Jeff Neiburg with us here on Jake and Ben. What's going on, Jeff?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for jumping on with us. Hey, Jeff, give us some backstory on this Villanova team. Seems like, every year, every roster is completely different. Is that the case for Villanova, like the rest of college basketball, or is this a team that's been together for a while?
No, totally. It's a new roster, basically, especially when you hire a new coach, you're going to get a new roster. There's one returning player, Tyler Perkins, who scored points on last year's team. Everybody else is basically completely new. Kevin Willard did a pretty good job in the transfer portal. Assembled a roster after he took the job at the end of March last year. Pretty balanced team. But yeah, totally new. That's basketball, and I wouldn't get used to too many faces around here. I'll be covering new ones next year.
What's the vibe of this team? What are they good at?
Pretty balanced. They've won games in multiple ways. They've won games where they shot the ball really well from outside. They've won games where they've had to play a little dirtier, a little grinded out defensive battles. Really good freshman point guard, Caden Lewis. Tyler Perkins, as I mentioned before, he's kind of an experienced guard. He's physical and rebounds really well. Good center in Duke Brennan, who also rebounds really well. They're just a pretty balanced attack, but they're up against a pretty good team today, so we'll see how that goes. How did they feel about their seed after what had been, a very productive season, a successful season in year one? Yeah, I think, pretty. The seeding was about where it should have been. They probably were more like a 7 seed heading into the Big East tournament, and then lost in the quarterfinals to Georgetown by 14. That was probably that loss itself probably cost them an entire seed line, probably 4 spots in the overall ranking. I went into the Big East tournament expecting Villanova to win a game and emerge from the conference tournament as probably a 7 seed on Selection Sunday and get into a 7-10 matchup, which is an easier game than an 8-9 matchup, especially when the 9 is Utah State.
Man, the arms race, we cover Utah and BYU as well in the Big 12, and the arms race from a resources standpoint in that league is bananas. With Texas Tech and BYU spending a bunch of dough too. What's it like in the Big East, and where does Villanova fit in the resource war? Yeah, I mean, obviously the Big East does not have football programs to support outside of UConn, of course. It is a bunch of schools that are basketball first. And Villanova's place in that conference is one in pretty good standing. I would say they probably spent the third most money on this year's roster in the Big East. They finished third in the Big East. Who spent the most? St. John's, 1, UConn, 2, Villanova, 3. It's not hard to correlate what's going on in the modern college basketball world. But Villanova is positioned to, remain competitive in the modern college basketball world. They should field a tournament team every year. I would say an 8 seed should be the baseline. They should be able to compete in a higher standing than that and become a program that should routinely compete for the second weekend. I'm not sure they're ready to do that, obviously, this weekend. Getting from Logan, Utah to San Diego is about a 12-hour drive. It's about a 90-minute flight.
West Philadelphia to San Diego is a much different conversation. Do you expect fans to travel for a team with this seed and this season?
Yeah, I mean, there will be some people here. There's, there are probably Villanova grads that are dispersed throughout the country. Southern California is a good place to live. Villanova's a pretty good school with some alum who make some money, so I'm sure some of them ended up out here on the West Coast. Obviously, that is, nothing compared to what Utah State's probably bringing here today. I'm not sure how much that stuff actually plays into it. It's a 12,000-seat arena. It's an NCAA tournament environment where tickets have been distributed to multiple schools. There will be more Utah State fans here than Villanova fans. But I don't, it's hard to measure how much that will actually impact the game once it's time to play.
What is I guess the players, and the coaches, I suppose, what have they been saying about Utah State?
Yeah, they've been digging in the last couple of days once Selection Sunday started, and once they got their seating, I should say. Tough matchup zone defense to go against, really experienced and physical guards who get into the paint and attack. It's going to be a tough matchup for Villanova. Villanova's guards, especially Caden Lewis is a freshman. Bryce Lindsey has not, he's a sophomore. They don't have a ton of tournament experience. It's going to be tough to stop Mason Foslev and MJ Collins. It's kind of a coin flip game, though, and I think that's kind of the general sense I've gotten from being around the team and the coaching staff the last couple of days. It's a really tough opponent who's really good at offense and plays an interesting style of defense, but it's one they're prepared to go up against.
Who do you expect to come out on top? I don't know. You're a beat guy, so maybe you're not comfortable making picks, but what do you think?
No, that's fine. I'm a beat guy who does a little analysis here and there, and I wrote yesterday in a story where I was writing about some things to watch, and I decided to throw in a prediction at the end: Utah State 71, Villanova 66.
Okay. Well, man, I hope it's close. I hope it's a good one like that. That's what the tournament's all about.
Yeah,
and Jeff, we certainly appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your time. Enjoy that game.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, guys.
There you go. That's Jeff Neiburg, covers Villanova for the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Man, I'm happy he's on the road. That's cool. That's a far flight to make. You honestly don't always know if writers are going to be on the road for a college game like this anymore. So good for the Philly Inquirer.
He likes the Aggies.
Yeah.
I wonder if a lot of Big East teams are going to start winning more, even more than they usually do in the new world because of what he was talking about, not having football programs.
Yep.
I mean, they can pump all their dough at Villanova into the basketball program.
And it makes sense to. Yeah, I mean, again, the money's not really being split up in all the places, especially the heavy places. Now, they also make less money. Some of the numbers I think came out with Utah yesterday and said Utah's football program made $100 million, cost $50 to operate, but that $50 million is how you fund the rest of everything in your program. You don't have that. Where does your money actually come from if you're Villanova or if you're a Gonzaga or something along those lines? But, yeah, you pump all your money into that and you're in good shape.
Except for the money. I mean, I know we get lost talking about the 20 that they're allowed to spend or whatever, but that's not what we're talking about. Villanova is going to get money from its boosters to fund its basketball program. The same way BYU is getting money from its boosters to fund its basketball program. The difference with Villanova is those same boosters don't have to carve off any dough for the football program, whereas at BYU, they're trying to compete in both. So what's the NIL budget for the basketball team? I know everybody's like, it's 20, but for the sake of argument, let's just call it 10.
Mm-hmm.
What is the budget for the football program?
Right.
I mean, that's 12 players on the basketball program.
Mm-hmm.
Football is 100 now?
No, it can be a real advantage. In fact, I think some teams will decide, football, we'd love to do it. We can't afford it.
So they don't make the TV money, that overall like $100 million you're talking about the football program generated. But how much money is going to that football program, not from the university, but from the people who are paying for these rosters?
Yeah.
That Chad Campbell dude is stretched super thin at Texas Tech.
Yep.
He's funding the basketball and the football program. Mm-hmm. If he was a booster at Villanova, he'd just be pumping all that dough into the basketball program.
Yep.
Do you think the Aggies win today?
They're playing with a lot of momentum. And clearly Villanova losing to a bad team like Georgetown shows how. Now, look, Utah State has some bad losses as well, but Utah State seems to be clicking. So I'm excited for them. I think they can get to the round of 32.
I hope
Arizona would be a different story.
That Mason Foslev carves out a little Aggie lore for himself today.
Okay, that'd be cool.
Because I don't think Utah State. Listen, you don't have to make a Sweet 16 run or an Elite 8 run to go down as a legend. Utah State hasn't won that many NCAA tournament games. They just haven't. Now they're in a better league, so they're getting a better seed, which is good for them. So they get more winnable opponents in the first round, including Villanova, in my opinion. But if Falslev goes out and balls out and they take down Villanova, I mean, that's going to be something that bounces around Logan for a long time. You know what I mean?
He's in a weird spot. I hope he sticks around next year and just plays at Utah State again. He seems like he's been very dedicated to that. The longer he waits to make the jump to try and become a pro, the older he gets. We've already talked about how old he is. This is his third year at Utah State already after a mission. So he's up there. And if he really wants to get paid, he probably should just go to a different college program, unfortunately. You know, that's the difficult conversation he's going to be looking at. So I'm with you, understanding that the clock could be ticking. Same goes for MJ Collins.
Unless old Jimmy Lobb steps up to the plate, man.
And look, he can just be a star in Utah State. That's not a bad life.
I would stay at Utah State if I were Mason Falslev, if I was guaranteed free fare at the White Owl.
Okay.
For life. Let's call it for life.
For
That's
life.
all they'd have to do is
lifetime
just
contract.
say free fare right there for life, and I'm not going anywhere. No? Ask for more?
You think a local watering hole would do that?
Yes.
For Mason Falslev?
Yes. Yes, I do. The burgers are very good.
Okay, I've not had one.
Oh, yeah, they're tasty.
Okay.
Fries are good, too.
Great. I'll have
And
to
then,
stop by.
Then
Next time on my way up to Bear Lake, I'll stop
I
through.
don't think the suds are Mason Falslev's thing. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. But I don't think so.
He's of age. He can
But
do whatever
the
he wants.
burgers would still be worth it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Stay tuned. We'll wrap up the week. Coming up next is Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson
1, 2, 3, move it.
on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two niggas on the airways, talking sports. They got him Matrix and also loves his tie guy. Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Wrapping up another week on the show. By the way, currently Kentucky leads Santa Clara 53-52 with 9.5 to go in the second quarter. We talked about Mark Pope having to win this game possibly to keep his job. What do you think about North Carolina losing yesterday?
Well, Hubert Davis shouldn't have had a job. Hubert Davis has never been a good coach.
No. I get it that North Carolina and I guess Duke falls into this. Lots of people, Utah falls in, wants to keep it in the family. That's a big thing for them. Roy Williams was a North Carolina guy before he was a Kansas guy. You know, Dean Smith and all that, I got it. But, yeah, I don't know if
Hubert Davis was your best option?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it felt almost reactionary if I remember the timing because Duke was able to dial up John Shire. Now, Shire had been really good as an assistant, had been around and was kind of a promising younger guy. Hubert Davis is not young. Like, that was the weird thing. I did not understand kind of the foresight of Hubert Davis as the face.
Honestly, much like USC, not any bozo can win at North Carolina or USC, but a bozo could win at North Carolina or USC. Does that make any sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Not just any stiff can. But
you don't have to be a genius.
You don't have to be a genius. Yeah, absolutely. If you can't recruit to North Carolina with the Jordan brand basically selecting whoever you want to be on your team, I don't know what to tell you.
So I'd be surprised, I guess, if he's back next year, but we haven't seen him being dismissed yet officially.
I'd like to throw my hat in the ring. I think I could win at North Carolina.
Yeah, just give us a bunch of money and go get the top players.
Yeah, I could do it.
Roll the ball out and see what happens.
Hey, you get me that guy. Okay.
That was the upset I
Now go
picked,
dunk it.
Though I think everybody picked that.
Oh, I didn't. I had North
that
Carolina
upset.
winning.
It was kind of a fun day of upsets yesterday. I thought that delivered on what you hoped. We haven't seen a major upset yet, but
High
Point beating Wisconsin was certainly
that's
the
a
biggest
pretty
one.
major upset.
Yeah, and even then that was a 12-5, right? That wasn't like outside of the realm. It wasn't 14-3. It wasn't a 15-2. It wasn't quite that dramatic.
Do we have more grandma stuff, Christian?
This is from Josh Furlong. Morgan Scalley's head coaching contract details have finally come to light. It is a 5-year deal worth $27 million, up to $36 million with incentives.
That's a lot. $5 million a year is a lot.
That's a lot less than Witt was making.
It is.
Or wanted to make,
four
or
less
is,
than Witt wanted to be
or is
making.
currently making.
4 less than he wanted to make at Utah. I think he's making 8 a year on average, right, at Michigan?
Yeah, it's 3 less, though, than Utah was willing to give Kyle Whittingham. And by the way, I'm sure Morgan's fine with 5. He's a new head coach. They don't generally, pay new head coaches the $10 million. I mean, Coach Witt was asking for 9.5 because he's, won for 20 years at Utah or whatever. Kalani got the deal he got at BYU because he was a hot commodity. Usually you promote a coordinator, and it actually is more of a budget move. But isn't it amazing? Ben, when I first got into this job, I'm trying to think what was Urban Meyer making when he first took the Utah job? It was like 1.5.
Yeah, I was
going to
say, is it even $2 million?
It was, and they were in the Mountain West. You know what? It wasn't even 1.5. It was because I think Urban might have been their first $1 million coach. That could be fake news, but it was close. And now we're talking about $5 million being a bargain contract. That's bananas.
Yep.
And now, granted, Utah's in a different league and all that. I'd be curious to see how much do you think your average G5 coach is making?
Football? 3?
Oh, I doubt it's that.
You don't think it's that high?
No, I think it's similar to the NBA, where I think coaches. Now, it's higher than it used to be.
Yeah.
I bet it's 1.5, maybe 2, something like that. But the only ones really spending $10+ million are like blue blood programs.
Yeah.
What's your guy, former quarterback coach, making at UNLV?
Yeah, it can't be that much.
We could certainly find out.
Broncos
average is 1 to 2.
Broncos signed a 5-year, $6 million deal at New Mexico.
So a little more than that at Utah State, probably,
so
but not much.
Yeah, it says it looks like it's $2 million to start at Utah State in his first year. That probably doesn't include all of his kind of media payments that you get for being a part of certain broadcast groups.
So old Morgan's doing fine. That's a pretty
great.
a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Well, 5 years is a long time. What surprises me is not the $5 million number. It's the 5 years. That's a long time to invest in a coach. I mean, that's where the payout money or the buyout money comes if you get fired. It's not what your salary is due the rest of that season. It's how many more years do you have on your deal. So getting that long of a contract is a real coup for
I think it's because failure is not an option.
Well, clearly.
No, I'm serious. I mean, we might as well give him the 5-year deal because if it doesn't work out, you're not going to be the one paying the price. Does that make sense?
For Harlan?
Harlan's not going to be the one paying that buyout if it doesn't work out.
Correct. He's not going to be around.
No, because they really are. I mean, after today's news, and I encourage everybody to go to KSL.com and read Josh Furlong's work on what was released. And Bartle has one up as well at KSLSports.com that really lays out all we learned from a Freedom of Information dump today about the contract disputes and all that. Would encourage everybody to go give that a look. But one thing that I think is true, and you and I both agree on, is that now Mark Harlan's future and Morgan Scalley's future are absolutely intertwined.
Yep.
And it goes well for both, or it goes poorly for both.
I don't get the feeling that Mark Harlan is dealing with a lot of green grass in front of him. That doesn't mean he can't get it back. He can't rebuild his equity, but I don't get the impression he's got a lot of room to work with.
Well, if he wins a college if he wins a conference championship in football,
goes a long way.
It's going to be he's going to be signing a contract extension.
Potentially,
yeah. Coming up next, Scotty G and friends. Now, Scotty is in San Diego, getting ready for Utah State and Villanova, and you're going to be able to hear Scotty's call. Is that going to be on both signals?
Yes, 1:30 pregame, 2:10 tip-off.
Wait, Scotty's doing the show today?
I don't think Scotty's doing the show. I think it's Hatch and some friends.
Okay.
Awesome.
And so they'll go till 1:30, 2:10 tip, and then we will take over both signals.
All right. Scotty G and friends are coming up next. We'll
Thanks,
talk to you
Christian.
next week on the Jake and Ben Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.